The silent internal review begins with a routine assignment handed down through the hierarchy. Your supervisor silently delivers a closed case file with sparse details, marked for internal review within 3 days. The memo lists only a case number, a tight deadline, and initials from an authority you do not recognize. Time is compressed, with every second adding pressure to complete the review without asking questions. You note the absence of standard audit records and decision memos that typically accompany such files. Archives hold secrets in their gaps, where missing documents hint at decisions meant to stay hidden. Your first step is to trace through old logs, knowing that inconsistencies often surface in procedural silence. The hierarchy imposes a quiet tension as colleagues avoid discussion of reviews that might reveal too much. Digital logs confirm the case is officially closed, but the lack of detail raises flags in your initial assessment. You document each gap in the file, building a map of procedural anomalies that point to unspoken authority. Authority monitors your progress, applying pressure through presence rather than direct instruction. Tools of bureaucracy sit idle, suggesting that approval for this review came through unsigned channels. Inconsistencies between paper and electronic records add layers to the hidden decision system you are uncovering. You cross-reference the memo with meeting notes, but the bullet points offer no insight into the review's purpose. With the deadline looming, you start drafting findings, aware that the report may face pressure to conform. Every word in the report risks alteration or removal to maintain institutional silence around the case. Subtle warnings from peers remind you that investigations like this carry consequences within the hierarchy. You organize the trace evidence, knowing that each document will feed into a final report submitted under scrutiny. As the day ends, the weight of unspoken decisions grows, with the review process feeling increasingly isolated. You lock away the thin file, but the silence around it echoes, foreshadowing the trace stage to come. You re-examine the sparse details, realizing the tight deadline imposes severe limits on any thorough internal investigation. Each tick marks time slipping away, heightening pressure to complete the review despite procedural gaps. Your request for archive access meets vague responses, signaling the case file's sensitivity within the hierarchy. Authority applies subtle pressure through a progress check, reminding you to keep the review routine and avoid questions. You compile inconsistencies, knowing the trace stage will test the silence around decisions meant to stay hidden. The trace stage begins, where you search through archives and logs to map procedural gaps and build tension. Stepping into the archive, you face physical records that hold keys to missing notes and hidden authority. Each drawer contains decades of decisions, but the one you need shows signs of recent, unauthorized access. The archived file is thinner, with clear evidence that documents were extracted to maintain institutional silence. Digital logs reveal tampering, with missing entries for dates the file was reviewed, pointing to hidden decisions. Tools of classification sit unused, hinting at unofficial handling that bypasses standard procedural checks. You document each anomaly visually, building evidence that contradicts the official closure record and audit status. A warning from within confirms the review touches on restricted decisions, applying pressure through peer insight. Procedural forms lack proper authorization, revealing breaks in the chain that should ensure system integrity. Cross-referencing exposes systematic discrepancies, indicating a coordinated effort to obscure truth and avoid consequence. A deadline reminder with oversight tightens pressure, forcing you to finalize the trace without delay or deeper inquiry. You start structuring the trace findings, aware each point will face scrutiny and potential redaction in the report. Audit records pile up, each flagged issue adding weight to evidence of hidden decisions and procedural gaps. As night falls, isolation deepens, with the archive's silence echoing the institutional weight of unspoken authority. You finish the trace, but surveillance reminds you that every move is monitored within the hierarchy's pressure system. You trace unauthorized logins that occurred during off hours, indicating covert review sessions to alter file records and hide decisions. Access control systems show tampering, with maintenance logs falsified, to allow entry without leaving an audit trail. Signature verifications expose forgeries, where approvals were backdated to align with closure reports and avoid hierarchical scrutiny. Supervisory oversight intensifies, with subtle pressure to conclude the trace quickly and avoid deeper inquiry into systemic gaps. Meeting notes reveal vague directives that enabled procedural bypasses, hinting at coordinated efforts to maintain institutional silence. A clerk's nervous testimony confirms missing documents were removed under authority pressure, adding to the evidence of hidden decisions. You diagram the entire process, identifying 5 critical breakpoints where standard checks were omitted to expedite closure. The evidence locker's disuse suggests that physical artifacts were never stored, violating chain of custody protocols and raising red flags. An anonymous tip arrives, pointing to a specific audit record that was altered to mask inconsistencies and protect higher authority. You compile the final trace findings, listing 12 discrepancies that challenge the official narrative and highlight procedural failures. Duplicating evidence feels necessary under surveillance, as you prepare backups to safeguard against potential data loss or redaction. Time pressure mounts with each tick, reminding you that the deadline looms and institutional weight demands a swift conclusion. The form's incomplete authorization reveals 3 instances where documents changed hands without proper logging, indicating cover-ups. The inspector's terse feedback urges caution, implying that further investigation could trigger consequences within the hierarchy. Each cross-check adds another layer to the map of gaps, showing how decisions were made offline to avoid audit and report scrutiny. Restricted areas symbolize the boundaries of inquiry, where hidden decisions reside beyond reach, enforced by authority and pressure. An urgent directive arrives, demanding immediate submission of trace findings, heightening pressure to finalize without resolving all anomalies. You package the trace evidence, aware that this folder will face intense review and potential redaction in the upcoming report stage. Securing the findings privately feels like a small act of resistance against the institutional silence that pervades the system. The trace is over, but the shadows linger, symbolizing the unresolved weight of decisions meant to stay hidden within the archives. You compile the last trace discrepancies, noting 5 gaps that remain unexplained despite the pressure to close the investigation swiftly. The urgent stamp symbolizes the mounting institutional demand to finalize findings without addressing all procedural anomalies. The supervisor's silent approval hints at the hierarchy's expectation to move forward, avoiding deeper scrutiny of hidden decisions. You begin the report draft, each keystroke weighed against the consequence of exposing systemic gaps to higher authority. The circled deadline looms, a constant reminder of the time pressure that forces compromises in the review process. New guidelines arrive, outlining strict redaction rules that pressure you to omit key findings from the final report submission. You write the summary, consciously leaving out 3 critical inconsistencies to align with institutional silence and avoid backlash. The shredder's hum underscores the routine destruction of evidence that could challenge the official narrative and decision chain. A quiet warning from a colleague reinforces the pressure to conform, hinting at consequences for those who push too hard in the report. You finalize the trace phase, aware that this folder now enters the report stage where silence and redaction will shape the outcome. The report stage begins, where findings face pressure to conform or redact, and submission involves quiet meetings and unsigned approvals. You start the first draft of the report, structuring it to highlight minor issues while downplaying major gaps to meet hierarchy expectations. The unsigned signature line represents the weight of authority and the pressure to approve findings that mask internal abuse. The manager's focused note-taking signals their review of every word, applying pressure to ensure the report aligns with hidden decisions. You incorporate the feedback, redacting 5 key points to obscure procedural failures and protect the system from external audit. The stacked drafts illustrate the iterative pressure to refine the narrative, burying inconsistencies under layers of institutional language. A call from higher authority emphasizes the urgency to submit, adding pressure to finalize the report without resolving all anomalies. You prepare the submission package, including an unsigned memo that symbolizes the unspoken approvals within the decision hierarchy. The nighttime silence amplifies the tension as the report sits ready, a testament to the institutional weight and hidden consequences. You submit the draft report, feeling the pressure ease slightly, but knowing the silent review process will continue with potential redactions. The submission initiates a silent review process, where authority decisions shape the final report version without any open discussion or transparency. This agenda outlines key discussion points, hinting at the pressure to align findings with institutional expectations and hierarchy. The supervisor's note specifies 3 sections to redact, applying direct pressure to conceal procedural gaps and protect the system. You implement the redactions, aware that each blackout masks a finding that could reveal hidden decisions within the authority chain. The closed doors symbolize the private discussions where report outcomes are decided without transparency or external audit scrutiny. An email from higher authority demands final approval within 24 hours, increasing the pressure to comply without resolving anomalies. You prepare the final package, including the memo that will remain unsigned to avoid direct accountability in the decision hierarchy. The unused stamp represents the lack of formal endorsement, relying instead on informal approvals within the internal abuse system. The clerk accepts the report without question, part of the routine that perpetuates institutional silence and hidden decision processes. With the report submitted, the deadline passes, but tension lingers as consequences loom from the pressure to conform. The ajar drawer hints at the incomplete nature of the review, with files that may never undergo full investigation or audit. A brief call confirms the report has been accepted, but with no details on the redactions or internal decision-making processes. You record the status, knowing that internal use only classification limits future access and protects the system from external review. Keeping a personal copy is a silent act of preservation against the risk of institutional memory loss and cover-up. The fading light marks the end of the report phase, with the weight of unspoken decisions settling into the silence. As you prepare to leave, the report folder remains, a symbol of the procedural tension that defines the silent internal review. The silent exchange with a colleague underscores the shared understanding of the pressures and hierarchy within the system. The blinking light of the security camera serves as a constant reminder of surveillance and control in the authority structure. Looking back, you feel the institutional weight of the report, now part of the hidden decision system and its consequences. A late-night message hints at further review, indicating that the silent process continues beyond the office walls with pressure intact. The final stage begins as the report moves into official closure, where decisions are buried in archives and silence. The message confirms that the report has been flagged for internal review, adding pressure to the filing process without explanation. You start the day knowing that the file must be closed today, under the tight deadline and unspoken authority directives. Changing the status to archived marks the official end, but the missing notes and inconsistencies remain unaddressed in the system. The stamp seals the file, a procedural act that hides the decisions and consequences within the hierarchy of the institution. Placing the file in the internal drawer ensures it stays within the system, away from external audit or public scrutiny. The supervisor's silent approval underscores the pressure to conform, with no discussion of the report's findings or redactions. The confidential stamp limits access, protecting the institutional silence and the hidden decision-making processes from investigation. Recording the filing in the logbook creates a paper trail, but one that may never be reviewed due to classification and authority controls. The logbook is a history of closed cases, each representing unspoken decisions and the weight of institutional memory loss. A colleague's call hints at ongoing pressure, reminding you that the system's silence is maintained through hierarchy and consequence. Shredding the draft notes is a routine part of the process, eliminating traces that could lead to further audit or questions. With the deadline passed, attention shifts to the next review cycle. But the silence from this file lingers as a procedural tension. The shredded papers contain fragments of the review, now destroyed to prevent any future investigation into the system's gaps. Locking away the personal copy is a silent safeguard against the risk of the file being altered or lost in the archives. Leaving the office, you carry the weight of the unspoken decisions, knowing the file is closed, but the silence is deafening. The closed door symbolizes the end of the review, but also the barrier to transparency and accountability within the authority system. In the quiet of the evening, the institutional silence feels palpable, a consequence of the hidden decisions made to protect the hierarchy. As you drive away, the pressure to conform and the memory of the missing notes fade into the routine of the system's silent operations. The silent internal review is over, but the weight of unspoken decisions and institutional silence remains, a permanent part of the system.